When a woman begins to ignore you, most men immediately assume the worst. They read silence as rejection, distance as disinterest, and delay as dismissal. But attraction is rarely that simple. In fact, one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human connection is this. When a woman is falling emotionally, her withdrawal is often selective, not absolute, and that distinction changes everything. If a woman truly isn't interested, she disappears cleanly. There's no lingering presence, no subtle engagement, no emotional residue. But when feelings are growing, silence tends to be inconsistent. She may take longer to reply, but she doesn't vanish from your world entirely. She still watches your stories. She still remembers details you mentioned weeks ago. She still finds ways, sometimes unconsciously, to stay tethered to your orbit. Psychologically, this happens because desire creates internal conflict. She's pulled toward you emotionally, but part of her is trying to regain control by pulling back. This selective silence is not a strategy in the manipulative sense. It's a regulation mechanism. When emotions deepen, vulnerability increases, and vulnerability can feel threatening. Pulling back gives her space to process feelings without fully disconnecting. What matters is not the gap itself, but the threads she keeps intact during that gap. Men often miss this because they focus only on direct communication, texts, calls, replies, but attraction leaks through behavior in quieter ways. Attention is a form of energy, and even when words stop, attention often doesn't. When she's still paying attention while claiming distance, it means something inside her hasn't let go. From a psychological perspective, this is a form of ambivalence. She wants closeness, but she also wants emotional safety. So she creates space while staying emotionally curious. This is why she might ignore a message but later bring up something you posted, or go quiet, then resurface with a comment that proves she's been paying attention the entire time. That contradiction is not indifference, it's internal tension. What separates men who panic from men who attract is how they interpret this moment. The man who panics sees silence and tries to force clarity. He overtexts, overexplains, or demands reassurance. In doing so, he collapses the very space that was allowing her attraction to mature. The man who understands selective silence does something very different. He stays grounded. He continues living. He doesn't chase clarity because he's not threatened by ambiguity. And here's where the dynamic quietly shifts. When she senses that her distance doesn't destabilize you, her curiosity increases. She expected pull, she expected pressure. Instead, she finds calm. That calm becomes emotionally intriguing because now she's not just processing her feelings for you, she's processing why you don't need her reassurance to remain steady. Philosophically, this is about emotional autonomy. The man who remains centered during selective silence communicates something powerful without saying a word. I'm present by choice, not by need. That message creates safety. And safety is what allows attraction to deepen rather than collapse under pressure. It's also important to note that selective silence often precedes emotional investment. Before people commit emotionally, they test distance. Not consciously, but instinctively. They want to know, if I step back, will this person chase me or will they remain whole? Your response to selective silence becomes a mirror. It reflects whether you are anchored in self-respect or driven by fear of loss. So the next time a woman ignores you, but still stays subtly connected, don't rush to label it disinterest. Pay attention to what remains, not just what's missing. Silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it means emotions are reorganizing. And here's the reflection to carry with you. When you stop reacting to silence as rejection and start responding with grounded presence, you allow attraction to reveal itself naturally. Because the man who doesn't collapse in the absence of attention becomes the man she feels safe leaning toward when her emotions catch up. When a woman begins to pull back or ignore you, what she's often doing without fully realizing it is observing, not spying, not manipulating, but watching how you respond when certainty is removed. This is where most men unknowingly fail the test, because they assume the distance itself is the problem, instead of understanding that their reaction to the distance is what's actually being evaluated. Attraction doesn't deepen in moments of comfort. It deepens in moments of uncertainty. And emotional maturity is revealed not by how someone behaves when things are easy, but by how steady they remain when things are unclear. When a woman creates distance, she's unconsciously asking a question: Is this man emotionally stable enough to handle me, or does he fall apart the moment he doesn't feel in control? If your energy shifts dramatically, if you become anxious, impatient, needy, or overly reactive, she feels it immediately. You don't need to say anything wrong for the signal to be sent. Emotional instability is communicated through tone, timing, urgency, and behavior. Overtexting, sudden seriousness, passive-aggressive comments, or demands for clarity all reveal the same thing. Her distance has disrupted your inner balance. And when a woman senses that she has the power to destabilize you, attraction doesn't grow, it contracts. Men who pass this phase do something radically different. They remain emotionally grounded. Their behavior stays consistent. They don't rush to resecure connection, and they don't withdraw in resentment either. They understand that distance is not a threat to their identity. It's simply a moment of observation. Psychologically, this is known as emotional regulation under uncertainty. It's one of the strongest markers of maturity and leadership. A man who can sit calmly in ambiguity communicates strength without force. He signals that his emotional state is internally regulated, not dependent on external validation. And that is deeply reassuring to a woman who is deciding whether it's safe to invest emotionally. This doesn't mean being cold or indifferent. It means being stable. You can still be warm, respectful, and present when interaction happens, but you don't chase reassurance when it doesn't. That distinction is crucial. Emotional stability is not emotional absence, it's emotional self-sufficiency. Philosophically, this is about sovereignty. When you remain centered during distance, you demonstrate that you own your emotional world. You're not asking someone else to manage it for you. That ownership creates a quiet authority. And authority, when it's calm rather than controlling, naturally draws people in. There's another layer here that's often missed. When a woman sees that her silence doesn't provoke you, something flips internally. She begins to feel the distance herself. Not as power, but as curiosity. Why isn't he chasing? Why does he still seem fine? That curiosity is not strategic, it's emotional. And emotion is the gateway to attachment. This is why reacting less often leads to more interest. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're demonstrating that connection with you is a choice, not an emotional obligation. That makes engagement feel safer, cleaner, and more desirable. Men often believe that reassurance builds attraction. In reality, reassurance is only effective when it's not needed. The moment you require it to feel okay, it loses its power. Emotional stability allows reassurance to remain optional rather than necessary, and that optionality is what creates attraction. So when a woman pulls back, resist the urge to chase the feeling of certainty. Let the moment breathe. Stay in your life. Stay in your center. Allow her to observe who you are when she's not managing your emotions for you. Because the man who remains steady in uncertainty doesn't just pass her test. He becomes the answer to it. And that is often the moment when distance turns into desire and silence turns into emotional pursuit. When a woman begins to ignore you and you don't collapse, chase, or seek reassurance, something subtle starts to happen inside her. Attention shifts. The emotional spotlight that was once on your reaction moves onto your absence. And that shift is far more powerful than most men realize. Curiosity doesn't grow when someone is always available. It grows when presence is steady but not guaranteed. Most men assume that staying constantly visible is how you stay relevant. So when communication slows, they increase effort, more texts, more explanations, more emotional expose. But psychologically, this removes all mystery. When everything about you is immediately accessible, there's nothing left to wonder about. Curiosity dies in overexposure. Men who understand attraction respond differently. When a woman pulls back, they don't disappear dramatically, but they don't chase either. They continue living their life with the same rhythm and direction as before. Their energy remains focused outward, not fixated inward, and that consistency creates contrast. She expected pursuit. She expected pressure. Instead, she finds space, and that space begins to speak louder than words. Curiosity is activated by uncertainty combined with safety. If uncertainty exists without safety, it feels like rejection. If safety exists without uncertainty, it feels boring. The balance between the two is where attraction lives. When your life continues confidently without her constant attention, you create that balance naturally. You're not punishing her with absence. You're simply not rearranging yourself to fill silence. From a psychological perspective, this engages what's known as cognitive preoccupation. When someone isn't fully accessible but also isn't withdrawn, the mind fills in the gaps. She starts to wonder what you're doing, what you're thinking, and where she stands. And because humans place higher value on what they invest thought into, that curiosity slowly turns into emotional attachment. This is why men who stay busy, not performatively busy, but genuinely engaged in their life, are experienced as more attractive. Their time has structure. Their attention has weight. When they do show up, it feels intentional rather than habitual, and intention carries emotional significance. Philosophically, this speaks to the principle of non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring, it means not clinging. When you're non-attached, you allow connecti on to unfold rather than forcing it into certainty. That freedom creates a sense of openness that is both calming and exciting. It tells her, you're welcome here, but I'm not empty without you. There's also an identity shift that happens here. When you don't chase during her withdrawal, you stop positioning yourself as the one seeking. You become the reference point. And humans are naturally drawn toward reference points, people who seem anchored, directed, and self-contained. Your absence becomes noticeable not because you're gone, but because your presence had substance. Importantly, this isn't about disappearing to trigger fear of loss. That creates anxiety, not attraction. The goal is not to make her worry, it's to give her space to feel, and feelings need room. When you allow that room without resentment or manipulation, you become emotionally distinct from the men who react impulsively. Over time, this dynamic often reverses itself quietly. She reaches out, she checks in, she brings emotion into the conversation, not because she was forced to, but because curiosity matured into desire. And desire expressed freely is always more powerful than desire extracted under pressure. So here's the reflection to carry forward. If your life feels full and meaningful even when someone steps back, you become interesting rather than insecure. And the moment a woman starts wondering about your absence more than you worry about hers, the emotional balance has already shifted in your favor. When words disappear, the body rarely lies. And this is where many men misread what's actually happening. They focus so intensely on messages not being returned or conversations cooling down that they miss the quieter, more honest signals unfolding right in front of them. When a woman is falling for you, her behavior often contradicts her distance. Her mouth may go silent, but her body keeps speaking. Attraction lives first in the nervous system, not in language. Before someone can consciously articulate how they feel, their body reacts. Eye contact lingers a fraction longer than necessary. Her posture opens when you enter the room. She mirrors your movements without realizing it. Even in moments where she appears emotionally distant, her physical responses betray engagement. Psychologically, this happens because the body responds faster than the mind can regulate. This contradiction, distance in communication paired with closeness in body language, is not confusion, it's conflict. Part of her is trying to maintain emotional control, while another part is responding instinctively to attraction, and instinct almost always wins, at least in the short term. The body leans toward what feels safe, familiar, and stimulating, even when the mind is still deciding what to do about it. Men who misunderstand this dynamic often confront it verbally. They ask for clarity. They try to resolve the contradiction with conversation. But attraction doesn't respond to interrogation, it responds to presence. The men who understand body language don't call attention to it. They observe quietly. They remain grounded. And that calm awareness amplifies the attraction that's already there. From a psychological standpoint, nonverbal cues are harder to fake than words. Someone can choose not to text back. Someone can choose to appear indifferent. But microexpressions, proximity, tone shifts, and nervous energy are largely unconscious. When a woman leans closer during conversation despite claiming distance, when she maintains eye contact longer than social norms require, when she becomes physically animated around you, these are not accidents. They are emotional leakage. This is why emotional intelligence matters more than verbal reassurance. A man who reads body language understands that attraction often shows itself sideways. He doesn't need constant confirmation. He notices how she reacts to his presence, not just how quickly she replies. And because he doesn't push or verbal alignment prematurely, he allows her internal tension to resolve naturally. Philosophically, this comes down to patience with ambiguity. Most people want certainty immediately. They want words to match feelings in real time. But human psychology doesn't work that cleanly. Emotions mature in layers. The body often arrives first. The mind follows later. When you allow that process without forcing coherence too soon, attraction has room to deepen rather than collapse. There's also a deeper signal being sent when you don't overreact to contradictory behavior. You communicate that you're perceptive without being reactive. You see what's happening, but you're not threatened by it. That composure creates safety, and safety is what allows a woman to eventually drop the distance and align her words with what her body has been expressing all along. It's important to emphasize that this is not about decoding or manipulating signals. It's about awareness. When you're present enough to notice what's being communicated beyond words, you stop needing reassurance. You trust the process, and that trust itself becomes attractive because it reflects confidence, emotional maturity, and self-control. Over time, this dynamic often resolves itself without effort. As her comfort grows, the distance fades. The body no longer has to contradict the mind because the mind finally catches up. And when that happens, the connection feels organic, not forced. So here's the reflection to leave with you. Stop listening only to silence. Watch behavior, feel energy, notice proximity, because when a woman's words pull away but her body keeps leaning in, attraction is already speaking. And the man who can remain calm, observant, and grounded in that moment is the one she eventually feels safe moving toward fully. There's a moment that often gets misunderstood, and it's one of the clearest indicators that a woman's feelings have deepened rather than faded. After a period of distance or silence, she reappears, but not with explanations, justifications, or logical updates. She comes back with emotion, and that distinction matters more than most men realize. When someone loses interest, they re-enter conversations with neutrality, politeness, surface-level logic. They explain where they've been, what they were busy with, and why the gap occurred. There's a clean emotional line between before and after. But when a woman is falling, her return carries a different quality. There's warmth, playfulness, curiosity, sometimes even nervous energy. She doesn't say, "Sorry, I was busy." She says something that reconnects emotionally, teasing you, checking in on something personal, or opening up unexpectedly. Psychologically, this happens because emotion seeks resolution. Distance creates tension when feelings are involved. If there's no emotional attachment, distance feels neutral. But when attachment is forming, silence becomes uncomfortable. Not for you, but for her. So when she reappears, she does it through emotion rather than logic, because emotion is what's been active beneath the surface the entire time. Men often sabotage this moment by demanding explanations. Why did you disappear? What happened? Why didn't you reply? Those questions pull the interaction back into the rational mind, where attraction is weakest. They force her to justify something that was emotional, not logical, and in doing so, they drain the very energy that brought her back in the first place. Men who understand attraction respond differently. They don't interrogate the gap. They meet the emotion where it shows up. If she returns playfully, they stay playful. If she opens up, they listen without judgment. They don't punish her absence or reward it excessively. They simply stay present. That response communicates emotional intelligence and confidence, two traits that deepen attraction rather than stall it. From a psychological standpoint, this is about emotional attunement. Being attuned means responding to the emotional layer of interaction rather than the surface narrative. When a woman reappears emotionally, she's offering a bridge back into connection. How you step onto that bridge determines whether attraction grows or collapses. There's also vulnerability in this moment, even if it's subtle. Reaching out after distance carries risk. She doesn't know how you'll respond. Will you be cold, defensive, needy, or calm and grounded? When you respond without resentment or pressure, you create safety. And safety is what allows her to invest further without fear of emotional punishment. Philosophically, this moment reflects a deeper truth about human connection. People don't move toward what judges them, they move toward what understands them. When you allow her return to exist without needing explanation, you signal that connection with you is not conditional on perfection or constant availability. That makes you feel emotionally spacious rather than demanding. This is also where emotional leadership shows itself. Leadership doesn't mean control. It means setting the emotional tone. By staying centered, warm, and non-reactive, you lead the interaction forward rather than pulling it backward into old tension. She feels that guidance, even if she can't articulate it. And that feeling is often interpreted as attraction. Over time, these moments accumulate. Each time she pulls away and returns to emotional safety rather than conflict, her nervous system associates you with relief rather than stress. Curiosity deepens, trust grows, and attraction moves from something uncertain to something embodied. So here's the reflection to carry with you when some E1 returns with emotion. Don't ask them to explain their absence. Invite them to stay present, because the man who can receive emotional re-entry without fear or resentment becomes the place she feels drawn back to. Again and again, there's a final shift that ties everything together, and it's the one most men resist because it feels counterintuitive. It's the moment you stop trying to be chosen and start living as if you already chose yourself. This is where attraction either stabilizes or collapses, because at its core, desire is drawn to self-directed energy. When a man is constantly monitoring a woman's reactions, replies, and moods, his center of gravity moves outside himself. His emotional state becomes reactive. Even when he says the right things, the underlying signal is one of dependency, and dependency psychologically creates pressure. Pressure suffocates attraction because it turns connection into obligation. The man women chase operates from a different internal posture. He enjoys connection, but he doesn't orbit it. His life feels full before she enters the room. That fullness isn't arrogance, it's alignment. He has direction, values, routines, and self-respect that don't dissolve when attention fluctuates. This is deeply attractive because it signals emotional stability and autonomy. From a psychological perspective, humans are drawn to what feels grounded. A grounded man doesn't rush to fill silence. He doesn't overcorrect when energy dips. He doesn't interpret every pause as rejection. He understands that attraction breathes. It expands and contracts. His calm response to uncertainty communicates confidence more loudly than words ever could. Philosophically, this is about non-attachment, not indifference. Non-attachment means you engage fully without clinging to outcomes. You allow people to choose you freely rather than trying to secure their in. Terrorist through effort or performance. Ironically, this freedom is what makes your presence magnetic. When a woman feels she's choosing you, not being convinced, her investment becomes emotional rather than conditional. This is also where boundaries quietly do their work. Boundaries aren't ultimatums or rules spoken out loud. They're internal standards. You don't chase inconsistent energy because you respect your time. You don't overextend to prove worth because you already recognize it. And when something doesn't align, you step back without drama. That restraint often does more to trigger reflection and desire than pursuit ever could. Many men confuse emotional availability with emotional overexposure. Availability is presence when it matters. Overexposure is constant access without self-regulation. The former builds trust, the latter erodes mystery. When you pace your energy, when you show interest without abandoning yourself, you allow attraction to mature instead of spike and crash. There's also a subtle power in acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It means you stop fighting reality. If she leans in, you meet her. If she leans back, you don't chase. You remain steady. This steadiness creates contrast. She begins to notice that you don't disappear when things are easy, and you don't unravel when they're uncertain. That consistency becomes emotionally anchoring. Over time, something shifts inside her. She stops testing and starts trusting. She stops wondering where she stands and starts wondering why she feels drawn. And often, that's when pursuit reverses, not because you engineered it, but because you stopped interfering with it. This is the quiet truth. Beneath everything you've heard today, attraction grows where self-respect lives. When you stop trying to be irresistible and start being rooted, you become the kind of man women don't feel the need to chase, because they already feel pulled. So reflect on this as you move forward. Choose to build a life that doesn't wait for permission to feel whole. When you do, connection becomes a complement, not a cure. And that's when attraction finally finds you.